back to Book Buzz. We're the Beebe librarians from the reference department, and we're here to talk about books. With me today is Jeff Clapes, the head of our reference department, and this is Beth Radcliffe, who is also one of our reference librarians, and she does home delivery. My name is Leanne Ellis, and I'm a Reader's Advisory Librarian as well as a reference librarian. And we are just going to start talking about books, which is one of the things we like to do very, very much. So, Jeff, supposedly I've heard that you have a read-alike for Louise Penny.
And you heard from.
From you.
Well, yeah, it was fun because I watched the episode that you guys did where you talked for like endlessly about Louise Penny.
It
which
was
is not
almost
hard.
endless, yeah.
And of course, I love Louise Penny too, but yeah, it's hard to find a good read-alike for her because there's various reasons why people might like her. And I'm hard because I'm actually not much of a mystery reader. I like mysteries if they have a very strong sense of place. Yeah. And if they do really well with character, which obviously Louise Penny does really well. So I've enjoyed hers a lot, but I find that there's not too many authors out there who do both of those things well for me. Mm-hmm. Or they do, but there's still not enough like her to really feel like a good read-alike. But the one I would suggest, and I just read his new one, is Martin Walker, who does a series based on the character called Bruno, Chief of Police, and that's the name of the first book. Mm. I don't think it's quite as crucial to read them in order as it would be for the Penny, but I think you'd miss a lot.
Would you say read the first one, though?
Yes, and I think unlike Louise Penny, I think it takes her a couple of books to kind of really
hit her stride and
find her voice, whereas I think his actually are much more consistent throughout. I think he really hits the ground running with the first one. Bruno is a local chief of police in a small town called Saint-Denis in the Dordogne region of France, which is kind of in the center. It's the part of France that's into duck and foie gras and mushrooms and food and all that kind of stuff, red wine. It's not near the ocean. It's a very sort of dark, forested part of the country. It's also a part of the country where there's a lot of prehistoric caves. So those figure in some of the in the plots. So the thing that I think I would say is very similar to Louise Penny is two things. One is the place. He does place really well. It's a small town that has a constellation of secondary characters that are really well drawn and that develop over time, just like Penny does. The central character, Bruno, is kind of a gamache. He's different, but he's similar enough that I think that if gamache appeals to you, I think Bruno would have a similar appeal. He's a little bit younger.
I thought you were saying, you're going to say he's a mensch, he's a gamensch.
No. No, he's not.
He is.
The other thing that I think is very similar is the way he takes a mystery. Obviously there's a murder mystery in each one. It usually starts with a dead body somewhere, or murder, something like that. But he always weaves it into a larger context, and Penny does that too. So the murders end up having to deal with issues like French politics or terrorism or immigration or all kinds of things like that. Things that put the small town in that larger context. Police corruption is another one that comes into it that Louise Penny does. I like how both of the authors really delve into the way the machinery of police and investigation at the different levels of government work.
The procedural.
Because it's very different from the United States. They have different levels of policing and investigating and authority levels and how they interact. So you learn a lot about how, with Penny, you learn how Canada does it, and in the Walkers you learn how the French system works. And there's a lot of turf wars between the local police and the regional police and the national security divisions and so forth. So I think he does a really good job of kind of bringing that in. But at the base of it, there's a small community of people, and those characters you grow like in the Penny. You grow to love those characters, and you read the next book because you want to know what happens to them. And he doesn't pull any punches the same way she doesn't. You get used to main characters, and just like in real life, stuff happens to them.
See, that's the reason I would read them in order too, because that
Yeah,
stuff.
Yeah.
like,
I think you would
Yeah.
miss a little bit of that
Yeah.
if you didn't.
Is there the same sort of interest in food and the same humor?
Lots of food. There's a lot of food and a good mix of humor. There's a dog. There's no duck, but they eat the ducks in this one instead. But yeah, there's a lot of food.
Don't tell Ruth.
It's a part of France that actually has a lot of Brits in it, and actually the Walker is himself a British native who now lives in France.
Oh, I was wondering about that.
So
Yeah.
he actually is describing the area very well because he lives it. And as someone who's traveled there, he does a really good job of giving you the flavor of what the region is like.
And the food.
And the food. Yeah, I just really, I think it's interesting how he takes characters that you grow to like, and like real people, they may get married and move away, they may die, they may, things happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good things, sometimes it's bad things. They may take another job, so there's a few gut punches in there because it's not always.
And you
Yes.
get attached.
Yeah.
You
You
get
get
attached to
attached. It's not
characters.
always.
Yeah.
These aren't cozies.
Right.
There's always a little bit of intensity in there, but at the same time, there's that family feeling of what it's like to be in a small town.
And that part of it, not so much the characters of a small town, but I was thinking that the Camilleri, the Andrea
Yes.
Andrea,
Camilleri,
yes.
Yep.
his name just dropped.
Andrea.
No, but the Montalbano.
Montalbano.
the
Yes,
Inspector
Inspector
Montalbano.
The inspector, yeah.
Because that takes place in Sicily. He loves food. It's Italian food in this case, right? It's not necessarily limited to a small town, but it is limited to Sicily, which is also a small community. And I don't think he has quite the growth of Penny's characters.
I've only read a couple of those, and there are definitely some similarities. I think it would
Yeah.
be worth anybody trying them, but there's something that's not quite the same.
Yeah, I
Even
think it's
Cotterill,
the-
Colin Cotterill, who
Yeah,
you know I love,
yeah.
he writes the ones about the series about Laos in the 1970s. I love that series, but and he also has a great.
Yeah, he's got a great sense of humor.
The universe of characters is just wonderful, and they're funny
Yeah,
and they're weird,
yeah.
and they, you get to know them over the series of books, but it's still not the same.
Yeah,
it's
no,
it's a different atmosphere.
I think the similarity is that they
these.
both love food. There's a atmospheric and landscape that they do so well at,
But they're different.
and police procedural.
Yeah.
But they do have
And
differences.
and of course both Penny and Walker, it's French, it's French Canadian, and
Right.
France,
Right.
but
so you still get your croissants.
there's still a Gallic
Right.
feel to both of them that's different from some other cultures where you might have a series. So yeah, I really like this latest one deals with there's a woman's body is found at there's a ruined castle in the village, and a woman's body is found, and they discovered that she's a protester, and who is she connected with, and as is the case with all of his stories, the connections end up spiraling out to something much bigger than just the town. So it's they're all I just love them, and I think the nice thing is they tend to come out mid-year from when Louise Penny writes her
Right,
books.
so you have- right.
So I have something to tide me over.
So you have something to
until-
tide you over, exactly. And I haven't read any of them, and I've sort of been waiting till I can sort of start from the beginning and really spend some time with them.
Charlotte Thompson actually is the one who started me
really?
on them. She
Oh.
gave me the first one a number of years ago because she thought I'd like it.
Yeah.
And so he's had, I think this is probably the 10th one?
10th
maybe?
makes sense.
Give
yeah.
or,
10,
give or
11,
take, somewhere
like
around
that.
there. Yeah.
Good. Well, actually, because you're talking about procedurals, and this is a good segue, and I won't talk long about this particular book because he sells himself, and it's Michael Connelly's Two Kinds of Truth, which is a Harry Bosch book. It's a series. I think it's like number 22 at this point. And one of the reasons I want to point it out is, first of all, I read him totally for pleasure. He is not part of what I do as a librarian trying to connect readers to books. I have a relationship with Harry Bosch, and that's my relationship that I enjoy.
This is a family show.
Yeah,
So.
that's true. That's true. And we must remember this at all times. But what I love about him is the procedural aspect of it. He is one of the best writers out right now who take you from the beginning of the crime to the end of it, and does a really good job of documenting it, but
Yeah.
also moves the story along. There's a lot of dialogue. He takes it, step by step, but he does it in a way where you don't think to yourself, oh, all right, now they're going to go to XYZ. He usually does it in a way that really is a good story.
And from my reading of it, he also keeps the policing up to date. Like now there are computers,
Yes.
there's cell phones,
Yes.
there's databases.
And you've seen him evolve from someone who's older. In this one, he's been retired for 3 years. He's in his 60s.
Yeah.
He is not someone who loves his cell phone. In fact, he relies a lot on his daughter to give him tips, and maybe he has to go to other people to do
remember the
database
daughter.
searching.
Yeah.
And it's great because it's time relevant. The other thing I love about him is that he is capable of doing that, the procedural in an expert way, moving the story along, and he does the inner life of his characters in a way that make you care about Harry and everybody else. And without giving away too much, there are certain people from his past that sort of come back in a way that was both delightful and horrifying. And I really enjoyed this book a great deal. So I would just say that if you're thinking, oh, he's cranking him out, he doesn't. He doesn't phone these in. He does a really good job, and this was a delight for me. And the two kinds of truth are about what you consider to be your gut reaction. What is the truth that you know
timely.
deep in your heart, deep in your soul, deep in your tummy? And what is the truth that people are telling you it is? And a lot of times, as he said, it could be your president, it could be a politician or someone else. So it's very interesting how he writes that. So that was so much fun for me. Anyway, but I understand that you've been reading a little bit outside your comfort zone, haven't you? Talking about...
I've been reading a lot of mysteries and thrillers. The latest one I read was Dead Woman Walking by Sharon Bolton. And this is a thriller, so it's not a mystery like Penny's, but it's not like Connolly either. And I love the premise, because the premise starts out with the main character taking her sister, who's a Carmelite nun, cloistered Carmelite nun, but she gets to come out of the nunnery to go on a balloon trip. And in the middle of this balloon hunt, where they're seeing this beautiful vistas of northern England, right near the border of Scotland, it's desolate, it's lonely, it's beautiful, they see a murder on the ground happening as they're up there.
Not just the body, but
not just the body, it's happening.
So they're witnesses.
Oh.
They're witnesses. And the balloon gets close enough that he can see them and they can see him, and he's got a rifle.
That must be really irritating to be killing someone and having.
then
balloon. What are the chances?
Today, of all days, the balloon had come. So he shoots the balloon, and they have to be on the run, the survivors of the balloon crash. And
Oh, so the
it's
balloon
just,
comes down.
Yes, well, he has a rifle, so.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want them surviving. So the main character is on the run from him. And
So
he's got a little
a nun
motorbike.
on the run.
Well, no, it's her sister.
Oh, okay.
No, without giving too much away. So it's really a chase.
It's a chase, so it's very much fast-paced, and it's a lot of twists and turns. It's a fun ride.
What did you think of her main character, the one who's being chased?
I liked her. I
Yeah.
thought she did a really good job of it, and
Have you read it?
No, I haven't read this one. I'm a big fan of the writer, though.
she's a good, strong woman.
I know her Lacey Flint series, and she wrote that under S.J. Bolton, and I loved Lacey Flint. It's just that she tends to take a female character and make them very different than what you expect them to be.
Well, she's running at first, so that's a stereotypical, but she doesn't run for the whole thing, and she's very smart and is good at hiding.
Right, so she's someone who uses her brains, but you're
Yes.
right, and that's the thing with especially romantic suspense. A lot of times the female character is running from someone, and someone has to save her. More modern versions
Yeah.
of this is that they learn how to save themselves.
Yeah, and
So is this a standalone,
it's
or?
not a romance, and it is a standalone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely, and
I
there
also-
is graphic violence in it.
Good to know.
Yeah,
Do you think that
but no sex.
the policeman in it is a
Yes.
major role, right? That's what I
Yes.
remember another reader
Yes.
telling me.
In fact, it's 3 points of view. So it's the main character, and it's the killer, and it's a policeman, Inspector.
No, it doesn't look
Montalvo, I
like it.
think
Yeah.
it's his
Okay.
name. So it's the three of them coming at this story and their take on it, which is really, it's interesting. So it does switch viewpoints if you're okay with that.
Yeah. Oh, good. But she does a good job doing that.
She does
like
a very
stuff
good
like
job
that.
doing
I do
that.
too. I
Yeah.
think if the author knows what they're doing, that's fine.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Yeah.
times it just confuses people if it doesn't. If it's not.
It's good because it shows you how well they can do different characters. That she can do a woman who's scared, that she can do a killer who's just trying to track this woman down to death, and then the inspector who's a little more clinical. So it's really quite good. And you get, I don't think Northern England is usually portrayed very much, and she does a good job of that. I think that's really, it's a nice area that's not often portrayed. So there's also that
Yeah,
as well.
that's great. I always forget for some reason that she is British, and I shouldn't because it's all she's ever. But she's, I don't know, when she writes, there's a universality to it.
Yeah, yeah. Yes,
I tend to-
this could be a balloon over in Nebraska somewhere.
It could be. Balloons can go anywhere.
They can.
And there's no high wire tension wires. Oh, that's funny. So Jeff, you also brought something nonfiction. Another book.
No, I didn't, actually. It's in my head. I don't have a copy of the book.
Well, it's in your head.
Yes, I do have a nonfiction book to talk about, but I don't have it because people keep reading it. So
Imagine that.
I don't have a copy to show. And now I'm going to forget the name. The Last Castle. It's by Denise Kiernan, who is much more famous for a book she wrote a couple years ago called The Girls of Atomic City.
Which I read and thought was
Did you?
just so well done.
I have not actually read
Yeah.
that, but it was a fascinating story about, now I'm forgetting which town in Tennessee.
I can't think of the name of it either, but it's a
Yeah,
small town where they.
It's the town in Tennessee where
They created it just
they
to
created
do.
it essentially to have these women who were basically working on the development of the atomic bomb, but without knowing that that's
Right.
what they were doing.
They were all compartmentalized.
Yeah, everybody
yes.
was doing their own little thing without really understanding what they were contributing to the whole. So this is another book that she wrote that just came out this fall. It's been on the bestseller list for a few weeks now, and it's very, very different, except in her style of writing. It's about Biltmore House, which is in Asheville,
Oh, yeah.
North Carolina.
I've actually been there.
Me too.
And yes, me too. And
Let's go again.
Yeah, we could do a
A reference
book buzz
tour.
on the road.
Yes,
on
definitely.
location. So Biltmore, of course, is known for being the largest private home in the country, and it was built by George Vanderbilt. There's so many Vanderbilts, I can't keep them straight. So it's basically a biography of the house, and it's kind of interesting because I wouldn't say I disliked. I enjoyed it very much. I felt I wanted a little bit more than I got out of it because, as someone who's interested in architecture, I think I was kind of hoping for a little more about that. But that would have made it a very different book. So it's kind of a mix of the development of the house and also the social background of the family and what happens to them as they live in the house and what happens to it after he dies and his wife dies and so on, right up to the present where it's now a remarkably successful museum because for a lot of historic homes like that, paying for themselves is actually very
Yeah.
difficult.
Oh, yes.
And the thing with Biltmore that's kind of interesting is that both when it was originally planned and the way it is now, it wasn't just a big house. It was designed to be a working community. So they have a special railroad spur that they built to bring the materials into this part of North Carolina in the mountains and to build a village where the workers would live and a church where the people who were living it was almost feudal in a sense, where this enormous house, 250 rooms, was being built, and it took years, and so all of this, it was more than a construction site. It actually became a whole community. And the other part that was important was forestry, because this was in the Pisgah National Forest, which is out kind of on the edge of the Smoky Mountains. And Vanderbilt wanted very much to try to advance the study of forestry in the United States. So I forget how many acres. It was hundreds of thousands of acres, much more than it is now. And he brought in very well-known people to try to develop that and to make it a sustainable working concern that would pay for itself. And that was sort of successful and sort of not at different points in its history. So it goes into a lot of that.
Don't they have a vineyard now?
Yes, they do. There's a vineyard. There's all kinds of stuff there.
Actually, I did eat at the restaurant.
There's restaurants.
Where the vineyard is. It was delicious. Yeah, it was lovely.
So it's interesting to read about a particular corner of the Vanderbilt family, which was huge, of course. And he was kind of a bit of an outcast in the sense that to build something like this in the middle of nowhere, instead of the socialite life of Newport or New York, which is where most of their lives were focused, he went off in a completely different direction and took all of the family money and built this massive house in the middle of nowhere. So it was very different. And of course, two of the most famous people in the country worked with him on it. Richard Morris Hunt, who is one of the biggest architects in American history, and Frederick Law Olmsted, who is the equivalent for landscape design.
And the gardens are stunning.
Yeah, the gardens are amazing.
I mean, I didn't even see a quarter of them.
So
because I just couldn't do it. But,
you see a lot.
Goodness.
You learn a lot about how the two of them advanced their careers through this project. In fact, for both of them, this was one of the last projects in their careers. So it was kind of a culmination of the things that they had learned.
Well, a lot of their land now is in trust to, or part of the United States Forest, isn't it?
Yes, some of it. They ended up having to sell a lot of it after George died. His widow. They were just. I mean, it was like a lot of enormous homes in Britain too, where. You know, as times changed.
Well, yeah, that's what it sounds like the
institution of the income tax. Actually, anyone who likes Downton Abbey, I think, would really enjoy this because it's an American version of that.
Oh, sure.
And seeing how the lifestyle changed from the 1890s when the house was built, going through World War I. When it was used the house was actually used for various purposes to help the war effort. And then after that, when the income tax was instituted and the world changed. So it was a very different life for everybody. And so it's interesting to see how that.
Well, that book does, a book like that will document the times and the social, the cultural, and everything else.
They had all these famous people coming to visit too, writers and actors.
And they were a destination for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
To segue, especially if you like to read about place, this is something a little different though. Because this is An Unkindness of Magicians by Cat Howard, and it's a urban fantasy. We say urban because the place in question is New York City, which takes on a life of its own. You see New York City in a way that you never ever thought of it, because this is the world where there is a hidden magical people who really run their own world at the same time. And what fascinated me about this was that I love books about magic, and I love books about magic that the metaphor is obvious but also very, very clever. And this is, because it's about power and how you wield power. And this is about a young woman who, it's basically, she's come back to get some revenge. So every couple of years, and actually it could be 10 or 20 or 30, but in this case it's 13, the great houses, there's a Merlin house, there's a Prospero house. She uses a lot of these names that will make you smile as you read them. They do something called the turning, which is basically they have a magical event where they all compete to get the power and be the top house. They get ranked. You can create your house during this period of time. It's fascinating because it's this political thing that she's made up that makes so much sense. And she is hired by this house who wants to become a house and decides, well, I think, I'll be your magician. So you don't know where she came from. You don't know why she has the powers she has. And it's all about what happens. And I don't like to give too much of this away because it really is a page turner. And it's one of those books where you're like,
I just read it and I couldn't stop turning the pages.
Okay. And
Do
then
they
you have to go to
interact a lot
sleep.
with real world?
Yes.
Or is, oh,
yes,
so
in a very,
it's a mix of both.
it's interesting because they refer to that a lot. They don't call them muggles, but that's what they,
But they call them mundanes.
But they call them mundanes,
Mundanes,
exactly. And they go back and forth about how well in fact, she does this amazing thing it's sort of her trial to see if he'll hire her to be his magician in the contests, and they talk about the traffic of New York City, and it's just this astonishing. Her use of language is amazing.
Yeah.
It's a really beautifully written book. I also think that it was a brave ending and one I did not anticipate, and it made perfect sense once I thought about it.
Yeah.
But at the time it ends, you're like, no. It was really wonderful, and the reason I picked it up was basically because I haven't read a fantasy in a while, and this really appealed to me when I was reading a review, and I thought, let's do something different. And I'm really glad I did. It was.
Yeah.
Is it a series or just?
I don't think so. She could turn this into a series, but I think it would be very difficult, and I don't know that she really wants to.
Yeah, I don't know that she could make it into a series.
Yeah.
Unless she went a different character in the story.
In the same world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which she could.
Yeah. But I mean, it's the usual
Good.
things. Families all have people that they disown. This is happening in this world. This really, and there's some humor. And some romance. But one of the things I would want to really warn people about is that it's very graphic in a way that is difficult for me to explain, because she talks about certain things that happen to people while they're doing their magic that is really
Disturbing.
disturbing. Yeah, disturbing is a good word for it. But it's in context and it makes perfect sense. So, So I would say that The Unkindness of Magicians was something different, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And I was glad to hear that you thought it was a page turner,
Yeah.
because I thought it was just one of those, I was liking
Yeah.
it, but to have someone else tell me that.
I kept on having to, gotta turn off the light.
Right.
Gotta go walk the dog. Gotta go.
There
I don't want to. I want to keep reading it.
Exactly. Well, we don't have too much time left, Beth, but is there another book you wanted to mention?
Well, I would just like to mention the Zig Zag Girls by Ellie Griffith, and she has another series that people really enjoy. I can't remember the name of that series.
Yes, Ruth Galloway.
Ruth Galloway. This is a new series for her, and it takes place after World War II in the 1950s. So everybody's recovering from the war, and it follows a policeman, and he used to work with what was called the Magic Men, and they were in charge of creating illusions during World War II, like making the Germans think that there was a whole field of tanks that could come and attack them.
Okay.
And so he gets together with one of those men to try to solve mysteries. And in this one, people are dying through magic tricks. There's no real magic in it. It's all
Right.
magic tricks.
It's vaudevillian, yeah.
It's vaudevillian, right? So it's fun, and I hear that it gets better with each iteration, with each one. So Zig Zag Girls.
Ruth Galloway is a lot. I think she writes about a forensic anthropologist.
Yeah, so it's very
and it's
different.
a little darker, but that has some humor in it that you don't expect. Did you find that in this?
This has some humor in it too, yes, and the other. The policeman's kind of straight, but the magician that he hooks up with is this debonair, charming man, he's really fun to read.
Yeah. Jackie, our assistant director, really likes this series.
Yeah.
And she said that it has gotten better as time goes
Yeah.
on. That's true. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us for the Beebe Buzz, and we will make sure that all of these titles are listed in the credits so that you can figure out what we were talking about. So come to the library and talk to us about books. Thank you.